Luisa-Marie Neubauer, German climate activist. Thank you for joining me today at Unesco. Sophia, my first question is for you. In your opinion, why is it important to put young people at the center of the work at Unesco?
Well, specifically when we think about climate change, our generation is already experiencing the impacts of climate change-induced weather disasters at a rate 3 times higher than our grandparents. And so young people are able to speak to and work on these issues with an urgency that really is unprecedented. And specifically within the confines of education, as we continue to progress through our schooling, we have the opportunity to really shape and have input into the direction we want to see our schooling and our systems going.
Thank you. Luisa, do you have something to add?
Well, I think it was already emphasized the two aspects. There's the aspect of climate effects, of who is experiencing climate disasters today, and then I would think about change as well. So who is most likely to organize a change that is needed? And I think it's just very unlikely that the change that is needed is coming from those places who is, mostly responsible for the crisis we're in. I guess the changes are most likely to come from those places who can think new, who can act new, who can overcome a status quo.
So on this note, Luisa, in your activism and experience, what are the main barriers preventing young people from contributing to decision-making processes at the local level or at the international level?
Well, I think we would have to differentiate here first between geographies, so where you're coming from. Coming from the global north, I can speak from a very different position than others might, who are coming from far less privileged places. But let's be honest, most decision-making processes across the globe, or no matter what level, are not designed to serve young people's interests. That's where the situation we're in. They're not representing young voices, they're not representing young perspective, and they're not representing young people's futures. So I think there is a lot of challenge about how these systems and these structures are set up in the first place. And then we see that once things are changing, people kind of put an extra stool to the table for some young person to sit there, expecting the same outcome as without the young person. So I think there's also a lot of youth washing happening around. And luckily enough, though, we see that more and more young people are demanding to not just sit and listen, but demanding to really shape the ways that we are making decisions and that we're talking about presents and futures.
Sophia, building on what Luisa said, what can UNESCO do in order to contribute to ensure those barriers are surmounted in our societies?
A large reason why young people, in my opinion, don't get involved in these processes is because they don't believe that their voice has the potential to make an impact. Very similar to what you said, there is this long-standing precedent of inviting young people to a room, having us tell our stories, and then doing a photo op, and there's no concrete follow-up or some sort of action that comes as a result of us speaking. And so I think the next step that UNESCO can really help to facilitate is a level of dialogue and having a concrete agenda where we're able to meet with elected officials, meet with representatives, people who have the opportunity to influence outcomes, and giving us an opportunity to communicate exactly what it is that we want to see, and then having it communicated to us whether or not that action was taken. Dialogue, honest, transparent dialogue, is the first step towards ensuring that we do hold people accountable.
And I think you made a really important point about young people losing trust in those systems and also losing trust in governments and institutions that are supposed to serve them. And we, I think, made this really concrete experience in places like Germany, where young people came to the streets to demand change with all the signs in their back, with the Paris Agreement, with all the global agreements that were already made, right, that governments were supposed to stick to, just to see then governments, politics, institutions ridiculing them, talking them down, mocking and kind of running around with empty words. And that is the moment that young people are losing trust. And that is not just a danger for combating global crises, that is a danger for democracies everywhere once young people have the very honest and I would say justified doubt about whether they're really been taken seriously.
So is there something that UNESCO and, let's say, international organizations could do concretely to support youth in their fight against climate change, or to ensure youth can achieve positive social impact in their communities?
Well, I would first suggest that UNESCO makes combating the climate crisis their issue too, because even though young people are, more affected than other generations, it's not our problem. It's, the world's problem. It's everyone's problem, and I think I find sometimes there's a bit of a hypocrisy of kind of trying to empower young people to clean up after adults. That's not empowerment. That's a
transfer of responsibility.
Yes, and that's part of the problem. So, and I think when I think about UNESCO, I think about an institution that is set up to value and to protect a world that is increasingly decaying. So UNESCO's own purpose is being washed away by rising sea levels, by saltification, by erosion, by everything that we see around us. So I think that would be the number one issue, to take away some of the burden of young people's shoulders, and to go out and to make sure that people understand you can't just go around and appreciate some UNESCO heritage and ignore that every single heritage around the world is at danger. It's at risk. Also losing its own future, its potential, its value really by an increased climate crisis. And the second thing, of course, is I think then an institution has an important job to include young people, to bring them up, to empower, to organize transparency and honesty and all these important things. But first of all, I feel we young people shouldn't have to do all the work that we are doing right now, just because so many institutions and generations are failing us.
And on a personal level, why promoting youth solidarity and amplifying youth voices is important to you? I mean, with Climate Cardinals, that's what you do. You try to amplify and you try to bring them all together, connect, and really create a way of everyone accessing those documents in different languages, but it's all created by youth.
Yeah, well, I often return to, and you mentioned this, the fact that it feels really unfair that so often at conferences like this, it's people from the global north, really privileged young people who have the opportunity to come and to take the platform and to speak about what they care about. Just like us. And it's not right and it's not fair, and it's because these systems are built in such a way that you almost forget how obvious it is, how inaccessible they are. The fact that we're in Paris, of course it's going to be mostly people who are European who are going to be attending.
We had a wonderful Brazilian indigenous come up, teacher, speak. How do you think that speech changed anything today? Because, I mean, we're here talking about change, right? We listened, we were impacted, but now what?
Well, something I often return to is someone once told me it's really hard to be something you can't see. And I think of that often because for me, seeing people like you, seeing other young women be able to take stages and to be incredibly courageous and to speak out made me realize, well, I can do the same thing. And to the same token, it's really important to see a young woman who is speaking in a different language, in her own language, to go up there in her traditional attire. That's important for other young women to see that and to say that they too can do the same thing and they can speak out about what they care about. And so I do think that it does create a shift in the narrative, and it shows that this idea of adequate representation is actually going to continue to get better. Of course, it's not perfect right now, but we're all doing what we can to open the door for other people to come after us, and also by acknowledging our own privilege and trying to ensure that people who might not have the same are able to access these opportunities.
Because I was very touched by the different cultures that we experienced today, that we saw today. There was a lot of differences between us, but we all spoke the same language of, demanding changes and knowing that climate change is for real, it's happening. So I felt like that was very positive. I was positively impacted by that, by seeing different people with different backgrounds, all young and all demanding and all going up on that stage and having something to say, something to share. And you really get the perspective how global this issue is, and that everyone really needs to be a part.
Yeah, I think in terms of representation, what happened here today was really outstanding. There wasn't a lack, I felt, or at least there wasn't, that lack that you would expect maybe in terms of regional or cultural representation. I do feel it's helpful to understand what role conferences and meetings like this can play and what they can't play. They can't cause change on the ground. That must be organized. They cannot build up that pressure on governments everywhere. That must be organized, and it can't change, a system in which this conference itself is kind of situated. That also must be organized. So I think it's helpful to do some expectation management, that this is, one place where ideally, this kind of spark goes, lives on and is taken back home by many people here who then feel a little more enthusiastic, a little more empowered, a little more, informed, and also a little more seen, as you mentioned, by what is happening.
We need to believe that Unesco is the change in order to come here and all talk about change, right? I mean, we can't be in a place where we have to feel, we have to see, we have to breathe new airs to feel like we're in the place that will create what we expect from the world.
Yeah, I guess it's quite, we're in a dangerous time, and I think it's easy to feel that no one else cares. And so it's important to manifest that from time to time, to see people do care and people are fighting their fight. And if UNESCO is willing to become this kind of avant-garde radical pioneer of the UN, I think we're all up for that one.
Do you have a message for the young people watching this video?
Don't get fooled that someone out there is doing something that you could never do. I think nobody has to do everything, but everyone can do something, and it's an important thing. And I think us two sitting here, it's easy maybe to believe for a moment, what can I do? And I think nothing in the world would ever change for the better if everyone would think, what can I do? So the question is rather, what could be my role, my little thing to do? And there's millions and millions of people out there who are counting on other millions and millions of people to do something.
I completely agree, and the important thing is that we each have a role, and it's going to be a different role. We all do different things.
That would be so boring.
So boring and so ineffective. And so hopefully you look at the three of us and think about the different things that we all represent, and think about the thing that you represent that's special and interesting. And hopefully next year you'll be able to sit here and tell your story, because we need to hear it.
Understand privilege.
Yes, and I really think about, what does it mean coming from the global north? And it is, this is something that has to do with humbleness and with acknowledging that whose voices need to be heard, but also acknowledging that if we don't get our stuff together in the global north, it's climate justice will remain in utopia. This is about kind of living up to responsibility that comes along with coming from a high-emitting country. There's a job to do for everyone, and there's a responsibility that lies in particular with those coming from the privileged places.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Sophia, Luisa. That was some great insights, and we are here as part of the Youth Forum.